welcome everyone to the Go Within podcast. My name is Yasmin. I'm the founder of Sanya and always happy to bring you these conversations regarding the inner world and the holistic and wellness journey. And today I'm sitting down with a frequent guest of the podcast, my very dear friend Alex Kakia.
Hi, everyone.
Alex is the founder of the Thrive Farm in Malta and many actually different Thrive projects, and there's the Gardening Gozo as well. And Al, you've been working for so long in the areas of well-being, permaculture, and just ecology, deep ecology. And I feel like my own journey and yours, we've always sort of had these parallel journeys. But I feel like over the last couple of years, I've really understood a bit deeper the beauty of your perspective that you bring from permaculture and deep ecology. I feel like my own wellness journey was a little bit kind of divorced from ecology. And it's been a really nice homecoming, I feel, to like a deeper connection with nature. And I would love to sort of start our chat from the point of like the wellness journey in general, the wellness field, and the important role that ecology plays, and especially in the healing journey of women, how important it is for us to connect with nature and to our bodies. So maybe we can start from that point of like your inspiration with ecology, like why is it so important for our wellness?
Yeah, I think I think for me it started when I was traveling and I was doing a lot of work with refugees with you a long time ago, and I felt so helpless in that space. And somehow I just felt really had this almost epiphany of feeling like if I wanted to support people in the world, it needed to be through nature. Like I didn't quite understand it with my mind, but I just felt really called in that direction, and I felt like restoring our relationship with nature and healing through nature and with nature. And this is why I call our organization Thrive, because I feel like we can thrive as human beings alongside nature, in a symbiotic relationship, rather than right now how it is where we take a lot from nature and we feel like nature's at our disposal. So I felt like this deep calling, and it came a lot also from my upbringing at school. And then I discovered permaculture and compost, and yeah, it sounds almost silly, but for me, the idea that something is considered as rubbish that can be magically transformed into a extremely important resource was just like magic for me. And it just really opened a whole new world for me, and then deepened my connection with nature. And I just realized how important it is. I mean, we're part of nature, we're human beings. And sometimes we see ourselves as separate. And especially in the activist world, we like feel like the human beings are destroying the planet, but we're part of nature. And that's also something that needs to be healed within us, because we also, there's a lot of guilt, there's a lot of shame, there's so much. I mean, it's a huge topic
Yeah,
on so many levels.
yeah. But it's, as you're thinking, I'm also thinking like it's not just the activist world, right? Because my journey started in the beginning very inspired with permaculture, and then as I got more into yoga and meditation, which can be very transcendental, right? Like you're almost kind of transcending your thoughts and your body. And I feel looking back now that it disconnected me a little bit from the sort of ground beneath my feet because, yeah, meditation, you're like, sort of going beyond this reality. And, we hear a lot of things like you are not your mind, you are not your body, and all of these kind of things. And for me, it's been a coming back to, okay, actually, without this somatic experience, without connection to the land beneath our feet, actually we have no existence, right? So I'm in this process of like realigning my spirituality with nature. And you came at it sort of more from the activist world, but seeing the same dynamic. And I think this story of like how we got disconnected, I feel is kind of important because I don't know, for me, I didn't really understand this clearly until the last couple of years.
Like how much we're disconnected from nature.
And like why it happened, right? Like for me, I went back kind of into the history because a lot of ancient cultures were very connected to the land because they were either nomadic or they were agricultural communities. Like they depended a lot on the crop. There wasn't a lot of, they didn't have freezers and fridges. They didn't have, I mean, they
Yeah,
had their ways of preserving food,
medicines
but
as well, like herbs, and of course,
yeah, they
definitely.
they were much more like the relationship with nature was much more delicate. They were less resilient because they had less technology to sort of shield them, right? It's a bit like us in Malta now, where we're totally dependent on desalination. You know, past cultures living on Malta didn't have desalination, so they would have had to find a way to live in balance and have enough water and not ruin the water table, right? So technology has kind of shielded us a bit from the delicateness of our relationship with nature.
Yes, and definitely with, let's say, monoculture, you know, so like the invention of industrial age with machinery and with tractors, and that sort of really shifted everything in the, let's say, agricultural world, because before that, everything was done by hand.
Yeah.
And obviously, when you do things by hand, there's a slowness, there's a delicacy, there's a deeper connection. With a machine, it comes and it pulverizes, right? And it just sort of, even these sort of machines, they just sort of destroy the whole ecosystems under the soil, you know? And it's just a reflection to like sort of what we're doing to ourselves, to our planet. And a lot of us don't even understand, you know? We did so many school outings and school visits, and some kids just don't even have experience being in a field, you know? Knowing where their food comes from. And it's such a huge topic. We can go into food, we can go into, you know,
Yeah.
but to bring it back to well-being, it's like I see it. We have our community garden, right? So people just come into the space, and most of the time they're just weeding and, you know, planting things, and they're just there in their peace, and people like feel that sense of community being together in nature, and it's such a healing, transformative experience, and we don't even realize how much we need it
Yeah.
most of the time until we've really fully experienced the healing benefits
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah. I have to say, for me, like the story that created this was a big eye opener. Where, you know, these indigenous cultures that depended on nature for their food, a lot of them really saw the divine as a mother figure, and they had this very kind of humble relationship, and like men and women both as children of a cosmic or divine mother. I mean, we had this in Malta with the temples. They were all built in the shape of a woman, or the statuette. And if you go to a lot of different countries in the world, the American Indian, the Indian tradition, Native American tradition, sorry, in Turtle Island, what is now known as the Americas, but even in Egypt, in ancient Greece, they had a different relationship to nature, also partly because their stories about sacredness were very interwoven with their ideas of women. Women had a much higher status within those societies. And I feel like as we went into this more kind of patriarchal, capitalist, industrial mode, the stories shifted, and there was much more of an emphasis on like male gods and male stories. And when you don't have a cosmology where the earth is the body of the mother, then it becomes a lot easier to destroy it. So again, like many indigenous communities, they won't cut down a sacred tree because they see that tree as part of their mother's body. Whereas now we've forgotten so many of these stories, and had sort of new stories come in on top. And there hasn't really been this space for relating to the earth as a sacred being. And I feel like that shift, we haven't really fully understood it, and we're not really so aware of the shifts in those stories. I mean, it could be a whole series of podcasts just telling this story and giving examples of how this happened. But I feel like it's had quite a devastating effect, specifically on women.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's sad as well because there's so much richness in this way of life, and so many of these cultures all over the world really honor nature in that way as part of their divinity, and it's kind of quite missing here. Of course, there's animism, and that's sort of growing a lot, and that's really been close to my heart. And I love you always sharing um, Joshua's podcast with me because it's just really blowing my mind, really, because it's bringing me deeper into this understanding of the divinity in nature, the sacredness, and I mean just simple things like the beauty of just being able to breathe air and hearing the birds and the sunshine and appreciating the wind. And when we find this sort of gratitude and the simplicity into these beautiful things that actually allow us to be alive, it just can just give us so much space inside to sort of feel and sort of be grateful as well, because life can be so complicated, and we end up really obviously fixated on our personal problems, on everything that's going on around us. And when we go back into the simple gratitude of being able just to drink water, because there are people who can't,
Yeah.
we all feel that magnificence, right? And we've been doing a lot of these water rituals, which are so, I don't know, just powerful. I wish for everyone to experience it,
Yeah. I think obviously like we lost a lot in the Renaissance period where we decided that like only anything that we can measure matters and counts. And obviously when you spend a lot of time in nature, you realize that nature absolutely doesn't conform to those rigid boundaries of what is real and not real and what just by what can be measured. So many unmeasurable things when you really sit in nature. And I think it's like almost this journey back in many ways into a deeper connection with the earth that we're trying to find. It's like we kind of, it's not to like over glorify ancient societies, because obviously there was a lot of struggling and there's been a lot of medical advancements that have made life, a lot better. Children actually live till old age for the most part. So we have had advances, but at the same time, there has been some key things that are lost. And I think for me, this realization of how we relate to nature and how sensitive we are, because we were talking yesterday about, how a lot of farmers in Malta throw a lot of plastic into the fields. So like when they're ready with the pipes, they just throw it. So I know I'm hitting a pain point, but it's like you could only do that if you are a little bit numb to your environment, if you don't feel the effect that that has on the beauty of the space. Like when you walk into nature, you see beauty. And if there's a piece of plastic, you feel that, like you can feel the difference in the energy. And I see this in myself as well, like how I was very desensitized to nature. Like I couldn't spot many birds other than like seagulls and pigeons, which are city birds. Like if you had to go and tell me like, put in 3 different types of Maltese birds, hear their bird song and ask me which one, I couldn't tell you. We can
Yeah.
recognize brands, right? Like if we showed school kids today like the logos of McDonald's, Pepsi, different football teams or whatever, they'd be able to tell what they are. But then sort of our birds, our plants, our ecology, we're kind of becoming a little bit estranged from it.
Yeah, I think I can obviously relate to a big part of my life feeling like that and more disconnected from nature, because I feel like it's only recently that I'm much deeper in it, the past 10 years. And it's this almost a superiority, you feel as human beings that you're above it, and that I don't know, your life and your work and your busyness takes precedent because it's sort of like more important, and you're like, oh, there's a bird. Oh, okay. Like, because I remember people used to say, oh, like, even because of me, like I'm into plants a lot. People think I know all the names of all the birds, and sometimes I'm like, no, I don't know the name of that bird, and I realize that I still have that. Like, again, these different hierarchies in nature where we respect different things, and it's sort of like, it comes a lot from. I think it also comes a lot from this idea that God is outside of us, up there in the sky, this white bearded man, which most people imagine when they think of God. And it's sort of separate from us. It's not part of the earth. So sort of like, then we don't have to treat the earth in this godly way and see it as this sort of huge gift, And yeah, it's sort of really looking at the narratives that have been given to us as we were growing up, through our society, through our culture, and questioning them, and questioning what do I believe in and what is important to me and what am I treating as important in my life and in my world.
Yeah, I have to be careful not to go down a rabbit hole of the different changes in the myths and how that like created this split with nature. Maybe that's
Oh
for
yeah, but
another
tell us one
time.
story.
I think there are just so many. It's kind of hard to choose one, but what really stands out to me is like in Malta, I have a very deep devotion to the Virgin Mary. And I feel like even though sort of, you know, unfortunately, Christianity is a very patriarchal religion. Like women don't have equal rights as sort of under the religion, right, over our bodies. I mean, we still sort of live in a country where abortion is illegal. So women can't become priests, right? Like there are restrictions on the way that men and women are treated in this religion. Yet somehow, like we've retained actually as our most sacred icon, the mother, which I think is really, really beautiful. And I find our culture of devotion to the Madonna really, really beautiful and inspiring. A lot of our myths, you know, the Santa Maria stories, the convoy, a lot of these myths circle around that. And I find it very inspiring. But at the same time, like when you look at her as an icon, she lost a lot of traits along the way. It's like she was watered down. If we look at like past versions of the goddess who were more fiery, more fierce, more independent, and also more sexual, right? Because obviously the Virgin Mary, the idea is that she didn't even have sex to procreate, right? And that obviously when we go into then like where does the story end? Like it starts with our disconnection from nature, but then a big part of the story is also our disconnection from our own body. So if we're told that, you know, our sexuality is a source of sin and something to be controlled, I always remember my mother telling me that before she was married, she was told like, sex is a sin, you can't have sex. Her parents were very strict over whether she could, you know, stay the night with my father. And there was a lot of control over her sexual life.
I was told that as well.
Yeah. But then, like, the day she got married, it was suddenly in her mind, the flip was supposed to switch. And now it's supposed to be okay and great and encouraged. And she found this really, really confusing. And I think it's so interesting that, like, a lot of the conditioning to women, especially as we're growing up, is estranging us and taking us away and sort of even treating our body as something that's not going to conform to how, you know, like the control that we need to assert on it, the behaviors that fit into sort of these moral scales.
How we need to look, how we need to present ourselves.
Yeah, and yeah, I feel like sort of later versions of goddesses, not only with the Virgin Mary and how she has sort of adapted over the years, but even if you look at the Greek goddesses, like the original Greek goddess was Gaia, Mother Earth, who in the myth, she gave birth to the creation and the first level of gods from chaos, from the void. But then if we look at like later versions, because they had many pantheons in the Greek tradition, like the later ones, which is Artemis and Athena, their creation stories actually, like the story of mother creating life got totally stripped out. So Aphrodite, who's like one of the biggest symbols of beauty and femininity and sexuality, she was actually born from genitals that were cut off, a god thrown into the sea, and from the foam she appeared. And I just find this really incredible, you know, that sort of the story of women's power to create life has been really watered down over the years until we actually ended up with a story that life is created by God pointing his finger in our tradition, and God's doing it in different ways, but a male God sort of creating life. And it's just really interesting because indigenous communities, they all thought that life was created by the mother, by the feminine. And I always just imagine, like, when these stories were first created, like, you know, you see your mother pregnant and her belly swelling and then the baby coming out. Like, I just imagine, like, going to a random village, you know, in the mountains of some indigenous community and telling them, like, no, actually, it was your father that created you, you know, and you'd be, like, really confused. You'd be like, wait, but I saw her belly swelling and the baby coming out. Like, this is really weird. Obviously, this took thousands of years for these stories of like how life is created to change so much. And I know like these are ideas that are very controversial in a Catholic country. And I don't mean to be disrespectful to our culture, because I feel like there's a lot of beauty and power in the symbols that we have. But I think somewhere along the way, our conception of the divine feminine lost some key attributes, right? So how do we bring those back? Because if the mother is the creative force and God created the earth as a part of a divine creation, then our relationship to the earth would change. And if our bodies are vehicles, especially as women, of creation, of the propagation of life, then the way we would see our body would be sacred. And I feel like a lot of women nowadays, like, we hate our bodies, and we don't like that our bodies sort of act in ways that don't conform to certain societal standards. I mean, we have a epidemic of corrective surgeries, of women saying, like, I don't like my body, I'm going to change that. You know, and I feel like it all started quite some time ago with these new stories. And I feel like we need to bring back the story of this earth being sacred, our bodies being sacred, and us coming into a relationship of gratitude and respect and reciprocity. And I feel like we can't really separate women's well-being and women's health from the reality of the context that we're living in.
Yeah, because of course it's a reflection, right? So it's like the mother nature and us as even the females who don't have children, we still have these mother attributes. So of course, if there's this big distortion, disconnection in this sort of part of it, and we don't, let's say, relate to that, then it's going to ultimately affect us. And I think just realizing everything that you're saying, like just really understanding it and looking at our own lives and like, where do I play a part in that? You know, what narrative am I believing? What do I believe is really true? What is real? What is an illusion? Just really reflecting on ourselves, and would I like to express myself in a different way? Do I even believe I can? What's my relationship with my body? Like, just even having that conversation with yourself, you know, like a simple moment to just like, how do I feel about my body really? Like, you know, and why? And if I don't feel love for it, like, why? You know, because that's really sad.
Yeah.
And a lot of us have that, and we can also have empathy for ourselves to understand why, as you explained, why we got there, you know, why we're here.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, like, before maybe we talk about some of the solutions, I think I'd also just like to mention, like, men as well, because men have also been negatively affected by these new stories. I found it really eye-opening that if you go back in time, there were a lot of stories of, like, mother-son duos that were very powerful and sacred. So, like, even in the Egyptian tradition, there's Isis and Osiris. Even in the Catholic, right, like Jesus and Mother Mary. But older versions of this kind of mother-son duo were very loving and supportive, and the son was seen as like the protector of the mother and the kind of inheritor of the protection of the community. And then in later stories, like as patriarchy intensified, those stories actually became more about the son killing the mother and taking her throne instead of actually being a protector of the creator. And I think this has also really harmed men, because putting them into an oppositional relationship with Mother Earth, and with women in general, like the mothers of their own children, has created a lot of pain as well. And they cope with their pain in their way. And see, women have maybe a slightly different pain that they cope with in their way. But we're all suffering, basically, because we're not seeing ourselves as children of the earth that are bonded as well by a common mother and a common duty of stewardship of earth and all of, you know, the children of the mother, like all the trees, all the animals, all the creatures. Like, there could be such a beauty in, like, us coming together to protect. And I think definitely in some communities we do see that happening, and that's like us at our highest potential. But then when we get sort of trapped into the more oppositional stories where we're kind of pitted against each other, I mean, even, you know, in many religions, especially the major religions, men are taught to see women as a threat, you know, like, oh, if you your lust is the gateway to hell, and if you look at that woman, she's gonna, you know, be the death of you. And there are a lot of these kind of stories, especially in the earlier myths, which actually pit men against women, and it's not healthy for any of us.
Yeah, I mean, in the Garden of Eden, no?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like it started there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously, like, sometimes I feel like feminism also can create sort of this separation, even more separation between the genders, you know, which is also sad because that's really not the point of it. And of course, there's also needs to be an honoring in the sort of journey of men through all of this, like you're saying, because it's not about it's actually not about gender. It's not even about men and women. It's just about the feminine and the masculine and the mother, and we all have that within us. It's just often we end up in these sort of almost these men versus women, and it's sad, you know, and it's not really going to bring us much healing. And that's why I think this is a conversation for all of us to have together. And again, it's the same thing with the mother. We all have this mother. We all were in the waters of our mother's womb, and we all have this mother earth. Um, so it's in a way it can bring us into a lot of connection back together, in these sort of when we can acknowledge it, right?
Yeah.
When we can really acknowledge it and understand it and create space for it, and also some space for grief and mourning of like what has passed. And because it is sad where we've ended up. Of course, there's a lot of hope and there's a lot of beauty and change, um, but there's also been a lot of pain, a lot of trauma, a lot of inherited trauma passed down through all the conflicts that are happening in the world right now. I mean,
Yeah, I uh, I always just think like we need everybody if we're gonna
yes,
kind of navigate through the intense challenges that we're facing as a kind of global community. And I definitely agree with everything you said there. And like I think sort of realizing that like we have this common mother and that there have been stories that have kind of tried to divide us actually gives a lot of hope for like okay we can come together with this common mandate of like protecting this earth, the creatures, and each other in that. And I think that might be like a nice point to say, like, okay, so after all that, like, why are we doing women's work? And I mean, we're going to be co-hosting a number of retreats specifically for women. And me personally, it's something I always shied away from because I feel like men need these spaces just as much as women do. But I've also come to realize that there is a real beauty in being able to have a space where there is a shared experience. And obviously, there are certain experiences, especially around abuse and sexual abuse, but not only, that women really share together. That those kind of conversations are really aided by having that safety. And of course, there's abuse that men have to heal from as well. And I think it's really excellent for them to have their spaces as well, where they can have that brotherhood and that shared support. And then we need spaces where we can also come together. But for me, definitely, I feel like there's a real power in bringing women together where we can talk openly about the pain that has been caused from losing certain aspects of ourselves. Like we talk a lot about creativity and how, as women, we've kind of because we've sort of fit into this like hyper productive, very capitalist way of life, we've kind of lost the space to be creative and artistic, and how much that heals us and how much that helps us process grief and pain and brings us together and strengthens our communities. So yeah, I don't know, maybe your experience of like why these women's spaces are important would be nice to share.
um, so I think, I feel that when you put yourself in these spaces, then you can really truly understand, because it's kind of hard almost to understand it until you've experienced it. Because we started, a few of my sisters, we started organizing these women's gatherings every year, just coming together and everyone sharing the responsibility, everyone cooking, coming together and holding each other for 3 days, you know. And there's just a softening that happens when we take out our daily responsibilities, our responsibilities, children. It creates a deep relaxation into safety. And it's not really necessarily about, you know, of course, the safety of being around women is important. And there's a lot of women who actually struggle to have relationships with women. Like, you'd be really surprised. I was surprised maybe because I didn't have that experience, but at the end, it would always be that many women would feel like, oh, I didn't trust women, you know, and sort of rebuilding that trust, at least to start between us is, I feel like, the most important starting point. And once we can soften into our feminine, because of course, like you said, I especially, and I know that you do too, we fall into our masculine a lot because we're very driven, we're very active, we're productive, and it's very addictive being productive. You get things done, you want to move faster. And
Productivity high.
yeah, I feel like I'm on a train and it just speeds up, and then to step back into the feminine and to sort of like even lead from a feminine space takes almost a deprogramming. And these spaces give us the space to sort of like soften into that, because it's not something you can do in an hour. You can't just like meditate for an hour and then fall back into the femininity when you've been on even your nervous system doesn't allow that. So that's why creating these spaces for a few days, first of all, it takes you a few days to land somewhere, wherever you are, in a new environment, to feel safe and to like get your feet into the earth. So, but having it for a longer time, for like a few days, 5 days, where you can just really like feel safe to relax and to step into your being. And that's where the creativity comes, when you're in relaxation and femininity and softness. And we need each other to step into that, because often it takes working through a lot of pain to get there. Pain that we didn't have time for, that was uncomfortable, that we pushed to the side, pain from our childhood, pain of the world. It's, never ending really. But obviously together and relating through each other's pain and feeling like, oh, I'm not alone in this, you have similar struggles to me, allows us to sort of heal through it, and for the next generation as well.
Yeah. I also love, like, I love everything you said, but I also love just that you're kind of creating those bonds of like holding space for each other, because I think, like you said earlier, like our processes sometimes are like hyper individualized. Like it's all about me and my individual therapy journey, and I have to heal my. It's all very kind of alone. And this idea of like, oh, actually coming into space together and learning how to hold each other and be held, which, as you said, like sometimes it's almost harder to let yourself be held by others because we've been so hurt and let down by maybe other people who didn't hold us as we wanted to be held, that we kind of have these armors and these tensions. And I think it's just so beautiful that like our healing isn't one person like holding the space and directing healing, but like actually us creating safety as a community together and healing each other and being healed by each other at the same time.
Yeah, and the beauty, I mean, is just obviously like people have different processes at different times. So when there's one moment when some of us are collapsing, and then then it just shifts because you've gained strength from that, and it creates resilience as well to move through that pain and to heal from it, and then to feel the strength after feeling so from a deep place of struggle. So and then that really allows sort of more space for expression through dance and movement and art and music. And yeah, like for me it's a lot about music, and I know that you had your struggles with art, but for me it's I had a similar story with my music teacher, and told my parents at Parents' Day, and he was like, no, she shouldn't continue doing music, and I was like so shocked because I really enjoyed it, and I still have the stigma till today, I still hesitate, and it's crazy just what one teacher could do. Of course he didn't have these bad intentions, but we have to go through a lot of deconditioning to like sort of reprogram that we can do things. We can be creative, we can be gardeners, we can have a green thumb, we can play music, we can sing. It's not just for the like extremely talented. We all have that capacity, and we can all heal from it, and it's so amazing to do that together.
We don't need to make it a product. It doesn't need to fit into.
Yeah, we don't need to be the best.
Yes, don't need to monetize it either. I'd love to talk a little bit deeper about grief, because I feel like it's a very crucial piece to our healing, but at the same time, we have a lot of resistance to feeling pain. It's like, don't I have enough pain? Do I need to go on a retreat to grieve as well? So I'd love just your thoughts, and I definitely have some as well, on like, why grief? Like, why are you bringing grief into this?
It sounds really weird. I love it. I think because so grief often comes from loss, right? And we all experience loss all the time. Loss of a loved one, loss of a relationship, loss of a job, loss of a dream or how we would like to see the world. So mourning, something that's lost is such a really important skill to have. And I feel like even with death, we don't really talk about it. When someone passes, we want to say the least thing possible, but just to show our care and respect, but not, dive too deep into it because it's scary. And often we have to deal with our own mortality, which is terrifying for a lot of us. But the more we open these conversations about death and loss, the more, one, it makes us comfortable with our own mortality and gives us more appreciation for the moment of every moment we have. And then at the same time, it gives us a space for really mourning what is being lost, because often we just don't create space for that. And that happens a lot with people who grieve past loved ones, but also even something simple like mourning, that you had a shitty day, just that's okay, to spend the day mourning that you had really high expectations for something or that job or that presentation, and to create space for that feeling, because often it's uncomfortable and we just don't want to create space for that. But we just are not accustomed to creating space for grief and mourning. And I feel like it's so healthy. And especially my more interest is in collective grief in terms of the world. Mourning our forests being cut down, mourning, so much struggling in the world, so many people suffering, so many issues with mental health in our world. Like, there's so much that we can mourn collectively, and most of the time we're really just focused on our own lives, and we're on the internet, and we're scrolling, and the reality is we can't actually mourn every sad thing we see, because it's too much for our system. It's impossible. So it's protection, and that's healthy. But then I really love to create space for, like, let's collectively mourn the things that really affect us together. And that's not only healing for us and for the group, but also collectively. Like, it makes an energetic, huge impact on the world once we do that.
Yeah. I also add, like, grief doesn't need to be terrible, right? Like, we have this sort of connotation behind grief that it's, just like crying for hours and really, but actually, when we make space for our sadness and to feel the loss, it actually comes not just as pain, but it also comes as creativity, as dance, as song, as, like, there's so much behind grief beyond sadness. It's not just about sitting in a room and crying and being sad, although that is a part of it and an important part. But I really resonate with what you said, and it's really interesting for me because a lot of these older traditions that we were talking about earlier, they were much more connected to life and death. Their stories were much more inclusive of death and decay and illness in general. They made a lot more space for it culturally in their stories, in their songs, even in their initiation rituals. I mean, even here in Malta, we have the hypogeum, which, if you read the descriptions on the outside, it says that it was a funeral, a cemetery, practically. But actually, new research has shown that they had ceremony down there. And yes, there were skeletons, but they were doing ceremony and initiation. And I was recently in America in some of the sacred land of the Esselen tribe, and we visited these wind caves that were their sacred caves, where they would go for whenever people were dying or whenever people were giving birth. So, like, the sacred space was for the beginning of life and the end of life. And I thought it was so beautiful. And I really agree. And I also want to connect it back into this connection with nature, because, as you know, like, in nature, there's a lot of loss. Like, nature can be very brutal. It isn't just a fairy tale. Like, even yesterday, we were taking a walk through the forest together, and we have this, oh, go to the forest, it's all beautiful. But the forest was a bit creepy, and it's also full of death. And it's not just like this fairy tale thing. Like, life isn't like that. And nature, as much as we try to paint it into this sort of like very positive, nature's all wonderful. I mean, go and watch hyenas like killing the youngest females because they want to take the throne from her. Like, there's a lot of loss and mourning that happens in nature, and I feel like that's one of the things that we lost as well from being more disconnected from the land. And I also just want to put in this message of, like, it can create space for so much joy. Like, we don't need to be scared of our sadness. We don't need to be scared of our grief. Like, all the best love songs have come from heartbreak, and it has, like, it's such a crucial part of the human experience. And yeah, I just love the fact that we can make space for it collectively and actually celebrate it as well.
Yeah. The thing is, it's like, I don't know if anyone has ever cried and felt really bad after crying, you know. Like, we resist wanting to cry, we resist being emotional in front of others. But then after, it's like a bit like jumping into the sea in winter, you know. You kind of resist it, but then after, it always feels good after you've cried. It's always a big release, you know.
Yeah.
And we almost don't even realize that we needed it. But it's always, even now, I feel it, even though I'm always practicing to allow myself to feel consistently, I still catch myself like stopping a cry. You know, I was at a funeral recently and I was like bawling my eyes out, and um, people were really shocked, you know. But it's like the place for it, right? A funeral. And I was totally fine with it. My mother was like really like almost concerned, you know, like, you okay? I'm like, yes, I'm like really sad. It's past, you know. I'm really good. Like, this
Yeah.
is great, you know.
Yeah.
And often what is not good is keeping it in, because that's what we
Or
know.
losing touch with it completely, that we're even numb to it.
Yeah, and that's what leads to illness, right? It's keeping all of these things inside our body and keeping them down and down and down, and eventually that's why we have so much sickness, and you know.
Yeah.
So creating space for that, really,
Yeah.
just creating space to feel and creating space for collective feeling as well. And obviously, it starts maybe with some pain and sadness and moves through that, but once you move through it, oh, so much beauty and so much joy, and it's so rewarding.
Yeah.
So rewarding, you know. And you know, when Carl had passed, we celebrated his death. Remember, it was beautiful. I mean, of course, it was super painful, but I realized that I was feeling the pain, you know, for myself,
Yeah.
the loss of someone I loved, but he wasn't in pain, you know, and we celebrated his life, and that's so healthy. But it's almost out of our culture to do that, you know. People say, I'm sorry for you, you know, not like, I'm like happy that this person has passed on, and I'm happy this person had an amazing life. And it's like just reframing how we look at death.
Yeah.
And also mourning, you know, death in smaller ways, you know, death of a relationship, you know. So many so
Yeah.
many ways.
Yeah, and even not needing to put like happy or sad even onto it, right? Just like be in touch with it. Like, I'm there with you. Like, I feel
Yeah,
it. This is intense, and I'm here. Let's feel it together.
yeah,
Like, that was like that's the whole point of ritual. And I think this is a little bit what we're trying to recreate as well in the retreat, of like, actually, when we come together to feel together, it's so supportive, and we get people who understand us, people who can offer us something different. And it's a very different experience, actually. Like you said, when you grieve collectively and you ritualize it, we don't, it's like beyond the good or bad. In fact, I always love this quote of Joseph Campbell, where he says, we're not so much looking for the meaning of life, but the experience of being alive. Like, can we just feel this experience, like, wow, someone we loved just passed away. Like, this is a really significant life experience, and it feels really intense. Can we be with it, and can we be with it together as well?
yes, a lot of beauty can come from that.
Yeah.
And I think also, like, yeah, it's this experience of feeling and also channeling that as well, right? Because it doesn't always have to be through tears, or you know, it can also be through expression, through music, through art, and creativity.
Yeah.
And
In fact, I think this is a really nice segue to like our shared passion for crafting. So I think this is something that we are definitely going to bring into the retreat. We both love pottery and making things with our hands. I've also recently gotten obsessed with weaving baskets. And this is something that we really want to share with others, because I feel like there are a lot of key ingredients into these crafts that kind of kept us in tune with the earth. I mean, for me, obviously, like, trying to make baskets out of natural materials has connected me a lot with plants and seasonality, and when to pick certain things, how to dry them. And also, we joke about this, but it's like the slowest art ever. Like, you have to be It's like the antidote to productivity. It's like the least productive thing you could be doing with your time is weaving a basket. Like it just takes so long. But there's a real medicine in that of like again releasing that conditioning of we have to be productive, we have to always be kind of making progress towards some goal instead of just being in the experience of life and being in it together and just enjoying the being as opposed to having to be in the doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's also a practice, right? So I feel like I'm far from mastered it, but I was telling, recently I was in my pottery class, and the teacher was like, "Oh, we're gonna finish in 20 minutes," and then suddenly I saw myself speeding up, like I was like, "Oh, I need to finish it," so it goes in the kiln, and I was like rolling the rolling pin, and like what am I doing? Like crazy, go into this sort of like mechanism of feeling like you need to be productive so I can get it in the kiln by next week, and then I can make another one next week. And it's such a it's so ingrained, and it's really like catching yourself and then going, okay, wait, it's not why I'm doing this. I'm not doing this because I want to make lots of pots.
Yeah.
I'm doing this because I just enjoy it. And that sensitivity with the feeling clay and the earth and creating and expressing yourself, your own creativity, right? Not just making something that looks good to other people, but just even just playing with it. Like I just love to sit on the wheel and just, it goes round and round, and I'm feeling shaping up the clay up and down. And, because I'm still maybe not in the mastering of the pottery wheel, you really surrender a lot to like collapsed vases and bowls, which is really fun at the same time as well, to not feel that attachment.
Yeah.
And yeah, we really want to bring this right into this retreat that we're organizing. We want to bring in these crafts and these natural crafts as well, right? I also love woodwork and renovating like old furniture, and these sort of like, we want to bring in these sort of natural sort of things. So we also have movement as well. Dance, like for me, dance has been such a healing, transformative therapy, really. Allowing myself to express my body and dance in a way that doesn't need to look cool.
Yeah.
Doesn't need to look like I'm in a club looking sexy, but just expressing my body and shaking my head, and like it's such a, that has been a big huge transformation for me, to see how dance can really be transformative.
You do have some of the most epic dance moves. Yeah, I totally agree. And I've had some really deep revelations on the sacred dance floor. And for me, it's also like a deep reckoning with the fact that spirituality is in all of these things, right? Like crafting, dancing, singing. Like what's like the one thing that all cultures, spiritual traditions across the whole earth have? They sing with devotion, they dance as a ritual, and they craft. And I think for me, because I grew up really not feeling guided by my own spiritual tradition here in Malta, I really sought different traditions overseas, and I dabbled with obviously the yoga tradition, with Buddhism, with different modalities, even experiencing ceremonies in the Amazon jungle, and they all taught me a lot, and they're all beautiful. But I also just feel really inspired at the moment to just realize that we have so much right here, and it's just about like turning to the things that humans have done since the beginning of time. Like, yes, you can learn a dance from the Sufi tradition and learn to whirl like a dervish. And I'm sure it's an incredible practice. But like here on our land, with the ground beneath our feet, our own rhythms that sort of are in resonance and in alignment with our land here, like that is, for me, a really beautiful way of like rediscovering our own traditions that are kind of embedded in the land. And we just need to have the sensitivity to listen and to embody them again. I just find it so beautiful that like actually all we need to be healthy and happy is right here in the land.
Yeah, and of course, in Malta we have a lot of clay as well.
Yeah.
So that's definitely something
Yeah.
related to our lands.
Yeah.
And that's an amazing thing. Like, you also mentioned wanting to build a kiln out of clay, and it's so even just with the wild foods we have around, right? Like having this connection to going out and foraging, picking wild flowers, and nourishing our bodies with the foods that are just around us, free and wild,
Yeah.
is really powerful. And it's actually really what our body needs because we're from these lands.
Yeah.
So it's on so many levels, creativity through cooking and through food preparation and through foraging and
Yeah.
hiking and being in nature. And yeah, it's like such a gift. With the pottery, what I found was really beautiful when I had done this pottery class. They showed us like the history of pottery. I can't remember now but in the very very beginning when they first started discovering all these pots, it just looks really similar to what people make now. And it's just there's something really special about feeling like, oh, this is what our ancestors did. I don't know how many thousand years ago. We're still doing the same thing. We're still kind of making the similar pots and with the similar patterns, and
Yeah.
it's just something special about that, and seeing what these people have created and you know where we've come so far
Yeah.
and why did they do that,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think we kind of hit on all of the different aspects of the things we're going to be doing in the retreat, like the rituals, the crafting, and so on. I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to add.
Yeah, I think maybe the earth ceremonies that will
Yeah.
do, because I think that's something a bit new for people.
Yeah.
um yeah, this is something we've been practicing maybe for the past year, you a lot with the tea, you know where we really, because sometimes when people hear the word ceremony they get a bit like spooked. um when actually it's just a simple, yeah, maybe you can describe it better than me, but it's just a simple way of coming together and honoring normally some sort of element or elements of our world, of our nature as human beings, and celebrating that and giving thanks and respecting, showing our respect and our gratitude. And yeah, and often it sort of creates a lot of divinity and space and depth within us, and a lot of love and beauty. And often it's just very simple by honoring water and offering thanks and creating an altar with wild flowers and creating beauty together as a collective. Um, yeah, maybe you want to share about this as well.
Yeah, I think for me it's just I really realize that gratitude is the language of spirituality. Like every tradition has its own devotional music. Like if you go to again the Amazon or you go to the Himalayas, they have very different styles, but the one key is the gratitude. Like the songs are of devotion and gratitude. So we can do that here and give thanks and gratitude for the land that we're on that's feeding us despite all of the damage that we're doing to her. She's still here supporting us. We're still growing vegetables. The rains are still falling. And for me, like that reciprocity and relationship with nature is something that shouldn't just stay abstract, but it should be. I remember last year when we had the Tribe Festival and we literally went to the spring close by to your land and was thankful that that water is still flowing. And every time I drive past it, it's still flowing with a really good flow, like throughout the whole of the driest months of the summer. And it's like that relationship is deeper because I stop to give gratitude and I notice it and I give thanks for it. And I think that's what earth ceremonies are. It's just like taking the time to do this. Again, it's been done since time immemorial. It's being done today, right now, as we speak, probably in a variety of different locations around the planet. And it's part of the medicine of like reconnecting with our land and reconnecting with our own bodies, because to be grateful you have to be connected to your body. It's not an abstract experience. You're not going to type into ChatGPT like, what should I feel grateful for today, right? You're going to feel into your heart what you're grateful for, and then you're going to say it. And so I think it's a real antidote.
Yeah.
And obviously, like doing this in Sicily, where we're going to be surrounded by a lot of wilderness and wild. And also, like for me, Sicily and Malta are very connected. It's a very similar ecology, a very similar culture. It does pain my heart slightly that I couldn't do what I'm doing there here in Malta. But unfortunately, it's just not feasible from a cost of land and also the availability of spring water, because we've damaged our water so much here. But at the same time, I feel like we have a lot of ancestors from that land and they were once connected. So it also feels like my sort of definition of home has sort of expanded to a wider circumference. And I feel like we can learn a lot about our local ecology here in Malta by connecting with the ecology there, because it's a lot of the same flora, fauna, birds, and so on. So for me personally, living in nature has really shifted my body and my connection spiritually. And I'm just really looking forward to sharing that in community.
Yeah. Oh, I'm getting excited now. Yeah, and it's we when we went to see that temple in Sicily, it mentioned Malta and how the temples are connected. So I think it's just the same land, really, just different cultures. But yeah, I can being in Sicily is totally, yeah, just it's the same but different, and that's why it's beautiful, because it takes you a bit out of your.
Yeah.
It allows more deeper appreciation,
Yeah.
and I'm really excited to, share that space with you and invite women there and surrender into our feminine and land in our creativity and create some magic together.
Create some magic, including some good food magic.
Yeah.
Tasty food is an important part of the retreat journey. Beautiful. I think we said everything we need to say. Just to close, I just invite everyone to join us. And if you have any other questions about not just this retreat, because I think the themes of this work go beyond this retreat, I really encourage everyone to check out the work that Alex does at Thrive, because we have a festival coming up in May and a whole load of different workshops. I mean, every month there's something going on that will connect you to wellness through this sort of groundedness in ecology. And I feel like you're a great service for this land, Al. And
Thank you.
what you're doing in your project in Wardia is so, like, you could be just creating a boundary wall and enjoying that land for yourself, and the fact that you're bringing people there and using it as a place to facilitate people's deeper connection with the ecology. I always have a lot of love for you for doing that. And thank you everyone for listening. Hopefully, we only touched on some very deep topics here, so hopefully we'll have some more follow-up conversations on this soon. But as always, we love your feedback, and if you feel like this would help anyone in your life who would resonate or appreciate the message, then we really appreciate you sharing this humble little podcast that we have at Sanya, putting in this seed of going within our inner journeys. Thanks again, Al, for being with us.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I love sitting with you and chatting in every way.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. See you next time.
Thank you so much.